You're watching YouTube, the cable access of the 21st century. It's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m. where I am, and it's time to talk about movies and answer your questions. Welcome to Dan's World. Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Dan's World. I was looking at my camera as I was setting this up. Looks like it might be another stuttery day. I don't know what's going on with my equipment, but the most important thing is you can hear me. I hope you can hear me. Maybe you can see me. This is our first live show in almost a month because the end of the year is absolutely nuts because I'm traveling more to see movies. That's why I wasn't here last week. You've got the holidays. We've got I'm trying to watch like 30 movies for the end of the year for different critics groups, and also for my own list at the end of the year. I'm trying to see as much as I can. So it's a nuts end of the year, and this may actually be our last live show for 2025 because next week I have a screening. The week after that, Wednesday falls on Christmas Eve. The week after that, Wednesday falls on New Year's Eve, and then there's also Stranger Things getting mixed in there, the holidays. So this could very much be the last live show of the year unless I can sneak one in. But I've got a lot for this one. If it is our last one, there's a lot to cover. I know this story is about a week old, but I had to talk about it because it's one of the nuttiest things that it's Quentin Tarantino, so how nutty can it really be? But it's kind of crazy. He decided to on the eve of Kill Bill hitting theaters. Ironically, the reason I didn't talk about this last week is because I was a few hours away watching Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair, in theaters. He decides to launch this attack on Paul Dano. Matthew Lillard and Owen Wilson caught strays, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what I thought was just kind of a funny quick hit. Mad Men finally came to HBO Max in 4K, but the people that watched it right off the bat maybe got more than they expected. Star Wars is coming back to theaters again, but in a way that a lot of different people thought they may never see it again. We're going to talk about that. And then the Golden Globe nominations. I was actually up early on Monday morning getting my video ready to go over the Golden Globe nominations, Hollywood's most unserious award show. And then the news broke that Paramount was going to be doing this hostile takeover attempt of Warner Brothers. So I dropped that. I did that story instead on Monday. Of course, we had charts yesterday. So I'm going to go over the nominations a little bit. I'd say a lot of it was pretty standard, but there were a few surprises I wanted to address. But let's jump into this Quentin Tarantino thing. If you haven't seen anything about it over the last week or so, Quentin Tarantino was on Bret Easton Ellis's podcast, of course, and he decided to, while talking about his favorite movies of the 21st century, was talking about There Will Be Blood, which is if not my favorite movie of the 21st century as well. And he decided to address the acting of Paul Dano, who is one of the actors in the film. He plays Eli and Paul Sunday. And he didn't hold back, and so this is what Quentin Tarantino said. Now, usually on the air, I will format quotes kind of in a journalistic way, but I decided to format Quentin Tarantino's quote the way that it read to me, which is an angry Reddit r/movies comment. So Quentin Tarantino said, quote, There Will Be Blood, I'm not going to do the whole thing as Quentin Tarantino. There Will Be Blood would stand a good chance at being number one and number two if it didn't have a big giant flaw in it, and the flaw is Paul Dano. Obviously, it's supposed to be a two-hander, but it's also drastically obvious that it's not a two-hander. He is weak sauce, man. He is the weak sister. He is such a weak, uninteresting guy. The weakest effing actor in SAG, which is ironic because I'm pretty sure Quentin Tarantino's in SAG, and I would cast Paul Dano over Quentin Tarantino any day. I'm not saying he's giving a terrible performance. This is Tarantino speaking again. I'm saying he's giving a non-entity performance. I don't care for him. I love that he decided to let everybody know at the end, in case somebody couldn't read between the lines, that he really was not a fan of Paul Dano. And actually, I was looking back at some articles and trying to figure out where this came from. This is not the first time that Quentin Tarantino has been on the Paul Dano hate train. As a matter of fact, this was from a segment he did on, I think it was Sky Movies in 2009, when Inglourious Basterds was getting ready to come out. While he was talking about his kind of rivalry / friendship with Paul Thomas Anderson and how much he loves There Will Be Blood. And he lit into Dano there too. Hang on, I've got a clip for you.
If I had of a criticism about the film, it would fall to Paul Dano's performance. It doesn't even compromise. He's just not in the level and the caliber of Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis is Muhammad Ali, and Paul Dano is Jerry Quarry.
Yeah. So Quentin Tarantino is not a fan of Paul Dano. Is it surprising that Quentin Tarantino would say this? Not really, I guess. He's never been. I mean, it's weird for me with Tarantino because for me, I love a lot of his movies. Just last week, I gave a glowing review for Kill Bill: The Whole Bloody Affair, which I loved seeing in theaters. As a movie fan, as somebody who likes his movies, I think he would be a great interview, but one of the people that I would least enjoy having an actual conversation about movies with. And it's because he has that thing that now is, you see it all over the place. It's sort of like what we were doing on Movie Fights, but for real. Like he has a real life Movie Fights mentality. Like Movie Fights on Screen Junkies, that show was about picking a side, and no matter what anybody says, no matter what, no matter how wrong you may be, you stick to that argument to the bitter end, and you fight tooth and nail to convince everybody that you're right. And that's what Quentin Tarantino generally does about everything, except he's not playing a game. He's just being Quentin Tarantino. What he thinks is right. His opinion is right. He knows the best movies and the worst movies. And if somebody thinks differently, they're wrong. And he's going to tell you why they're wrong. But even given that, to go after, I mean, it's been almost 20 years since There Will Be Blood came out. He's been holding on to this Paul Dano thing for a very long time. He has to know that his words carry a lot of weight. He has to know that there was going to be a lot of reaction to this. And people that have worked with him have said, Ben Stiller, I read, came out in defense of him. Ben Stiller's worked with him. And I saw, I think even today, there was a fan account, a Daniel Day-Lewis fan account that had come out and defended him. And they went to confirm that with his people. And I guess Daniel Day-Lewis's people said, no, that's not us. That, he didn't say those words, but he agrees with the sentiment. So, kind of, somebody walked up to the Daniel Day-Lewis, cobbling farm and knocked on the wood door, maybe sent smoke signals, and got a statement from Daniel Day-Lewis about this. And Daniel Day-Lewis, contemporaneous with There Will Be Blood, was saying that he enjoyed walking with Paul Dano or working with him, and that he'd come in at the last minute and he was up to the task. And so it's kind of a dumb thing to do because it's just, at this point, you're not young hotshot upstart Quentin Tarantino. It's, oh yeah, man, I'm upsetting the Hollywood establishment, man. I'm gonna challenge the norms. Like, no, you are the establishment. You are the norm. Like, you made it, and what you decide to do with your platform after you've made it is to trash an actor who, number one, in a performance from a movie that was 20 years ago. Number two, it's not like it's a performance that's widely considered to be a terrible performance. Paul Dano, I will say, Paul Dano has a very specific rhythm and energy to him. Now, he's not going to be for everybody. There have been movies, The Batman, for example. I still sometimes, when I go back and watch that, there are moments where I'm like, okay, that was an interesting choice. It's obviously a deliberate choice. I don't know if that's necessarily for me, but it's an interesting choice that he made. Sorry, didn't put my phone on silent. That's the Stranger Things thing, by the way. No idea who's calling me. I think that's the first. That's an interesting choice. Maybe not one that is on my vibe, is on my frequency. But There Will Be Blood, that's a movie, the first time I saw it, I was like, I don't really know what to make of this performance and this character. And the more that I watched it, the more I was like, okay, I kind of see what he's doing. I mean, they're both playing their own game here. Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano are both playing their own game. They're both trying to win over the crowd. And I think that last scene, the last scene of the movie, where the masks for both of them kind of drop, is brilliantly played by both of them. So, to say, oh, I didn't like Paul Dano and There Will Be Blood, okay, you can say that. It'd be like, he's a weak guy. He's the weakest actor in SAG. Like, that's crazy talk. And then he also said stuff about Owen Wilson. He said, well, I don't like Owen Wilson. And then Matthew Lillard, like, what? why even single, like, what did Matthew Lillard do? Did he see Scooby-Doo back in 2002 and he didn't like it? Like, Matthew Lillard is a guy who is, number one, he's beloved by many, not an A-list guy. So you're not even punching up or punching sideways. You're punching down. And I saw that Matthew Lillard at a convention, I think this past weekend, said to the crowd, he's like, yeah, that sucks. It really sucks because, I have, it's great to have fans to go to conventions, but I have trouble getting work. And, I'm not one of the most popular actors in Hollywood. And then to have one of the biggest directors go on a podcast and say that I suck, yeah, it doesn't feel good. Like, it just smacks of that just sort of entitlement and arrogance. And that thing of like, I'm just telling the truth, man. Okay. Listen, I know, man. It's like, but it's just Quentin Tarantino sometimes, often, makes it very, very hard to like him. As a fan of his movies, it makes it very hard for me to even be like, yeah, well, like there's no on this one, or I see where he's coming from. It's just stupid. It's just a dumb thing to do. It's a needless thing to do. And just why? Just why do it other than just to be a troll? And Tarantino's always kind of been that. But particularly this one, where it's like, you're just entering a phase. This totally derailed, by the way, the conversation around, at least online, around Kill Bill, the whole bloody affair. And I've talked about the fact that online conversation and like regular person conversation is different. I don't think that your average person that was going to see Kill Bill in a theater was necessarily talking about this, but in my comments on the review, in every review thread, like on Reddit, etc., where people were talking about it, I'd say 50% of people weren't talking about the movie. They were talking about F. Quentin Tarantino because of what he said about Paul Dano, and nobody's really taking his side here either. So it's stupid, it's dumb, and I see this is a comment from Brian Michaels. By the way, if you want to ask a question here on the show, as you often will see, I will, if you send in a super chat or something like that, I'll definitely get to it, and then if I've got time at the end, I'll scroll through and try to find some stuff. But this is from Brian Michaels. It says Matthew Lillard is perfect for the roles he plays: Scream, Hackers, Scooby-Doo, Five Nights at Freddy's, etc. He's not trying to do hard drama, and that's the other thing. I agree with that. You're going to go of everybody to go after Matthew Lillard, who I would agree, like maybe he's not in the biggest movies ever, but I don't think I've ever seen a Matthew Lillard performance where I'm like, oh, that guy sucks, or he wasn't very good in that role. I mean, he was great in Scream. A lot of people didn't take him as Shaggy because he wasn't sort of what they were used to, but I think I've seen the original Scooby-Doo a long time ago. It's like, yeah, he's doing it. He's making the part his own. Five Nights at Freddy's, he's not the problem with that, and I think that he's doing a pretty good role as the I'm not going to say what role he plays, but in both of those movies, like I didn't go out saying like, oh, Matthew Lillard was terrible. I mean, he had an acclaimed run in the 90s. He pops up now and then, and again, just one of the most seemingly likable guys out there. Really just positive and keeps in touch with his fans and seems to really acknowledge the legacy of the movies that he's been in and appreciate that. Why single him out specifically? So yeah, Quentin Tarantino, man, I don't get it. It was a stupid thing to do. I don't agree with it. I actually think that Paul Dano is very good in There Will Be Blood. I think that he's been movies like Prisoners, Swiss Army Man. I mean, I could point you to several what I think are very good Paul Dano performances. Little Miss Sunshine. To say that this guy's the weakest actor in SAG from a guy who, again, not to harp on it, who knows how to direct actors, but is not exactly a master of the craft of acting himself. I am a big fan of a lot of Tarantino's films. I can tell you right now, I've never walked out of a Tarantino movie with Tarantino in it and said, oh yeah, Quentin was great in that movie. He's passable at best. His best performance in one of his movies was also the one where he uses a racial slur numerous times. Like, that's where you start. You go down from there. So Quentin can't exactly be throwing rocks at the glass house of acting either. So yeah, I don't get it. Stupid. But, what are you going to do? Yes, Cat1721. Wasn't Paul Dano cast in There Will Be Blood very last minute? He was. They had another actor hired for the role. I believe they started production and decided that wasn't going to work. And Paul Dano was playing Paul Sunday, and they said, well, why don't you, do you want to do Eli as well? And so he was a double role. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't even like he had months to prepare for it. He came in very last minute, and I think he did a very good job. So Yeah, there you go. That's for Quentin Tarantino. All right. What are some of the other things that I wanted to talk about quickly? Not quickly, but, sequentially before we get to your questions. Oh, this was kind of a fun story. I mentioned it right up the top. Mad Men was recently added on HBO Max in 4K. And it was a big thing. You can watch Mad Men in 4K now. And sort of briefly, the way that it works is just kind of the way that the system works is when you're doing something like that, when you're adding a new file to a streaming service, whoever has the rights to it, whoever's got the master files will export, the episode file, and then they'll send that file to the streaming service, who then put it on their servers, and then they will, put it up there so you can watch it at home. Well, somebody apparently at AMC or whoever was in charge of delivering these files exported for at least a few episodes the wrong file. So you got a 4K file, but it was not the finished episode. And I guess it did not go through a quality check or didn't pass quality check. So the files that were briefly up on HBO Max, I believe they've been replaced now, because this is, again, I think this happened last week, were from episodes where things like visual effects were not finished. And there was a user on Twitter, among many who caught it, who posted this episode. This is from an episode where Roger throws up on the carpet in the office. And as you can see, this was on HBO Max. So for a short time, if you fired up Mad Men in 4K, this was the version of the episode you saw. If you'll notice on the right there, you see the two crew members, one of whom is operating the vomit machine, and another guy who's there, I guess, for support. They were eventually erased digitally from the show. And so, when you watch the show, it's just like there's a potted plant there. But yeah, 2 screw-ups in a row. Somebody sent the wrong files, and the wrong files got put out to the servers for people to watch. So there was a brief window, I believe that window is now closed, where it's sort of like the Starbucks cup on Game of Thrones. You could watch the no digital effects version of Mad Men. I think there was another one where like Peggy was walking down the street and it was supposed to be vintage New York, and it was like a modern Los Angeles street with like a cell phone store and stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of funny. So yeah, unfortunately, I think your chance to see Mad Men in the the despecialized edition, if you will, has passed. Speaking of despecialized editions, this was big news last week. I don't know if you saw this. I feel kind of like Jay Leno. Did you see this? Did you hear this? Did you see this in the paper? Last week, this is an official announcement. This is not a rumor. On StarWars.com, they announced that in 2027, so we got about a year, a little bit more than a year to wait, but on February 19th, 2027, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, the 1977 original classic Star Wars theatrical release, not the special edition. For so long, George Lucas said you would never, ever, ever see the original Star Wars again. But in 2027, the original new Star Wars, the original not new Star Wars, no digital creatures, nothing added to the cantina or anything like that. It's going to be the version that was in theaters in 1977 is hitting theaters. I'm super excited for this because I've seen Star Wars in theaters a couple times. I've never seen the original cut of Star Wars in theaters. I've only seen the special editions because the first time it came out, at least that I remember in my life, was 1997, which was the 20th anniversary. And it was that was the whole thing. It was the special editions, and then George Lucas was like, "Well, yeah, these are the finished versions of my films. You're never going to see the other ones. They're going to be locked away forever." Well, he sold it. A lot of people, including myself, thought that maybe one of the provisions of the sale to Disney was that the original version would never again see the light of day. But apparently, that is not the case. Now, I've heard rumors, again, not substantiated unless they've been substantiated since last week when I first was looking at this story. I've heard rumors that they may follow suit with Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. You might get the original versions of those movies in theaters in 2027 as well, but that is not confirmed. I cannot confirm those rumors whatsoever. But yeah, I'm excited about that because I would love to see a restored version of the 1977 original print of Star Wars, and it sounds like, unless something happens in 2027, that is going to happen. All right, one last thing before I start taking your questions. And as I said, if you want to send those in, I will get to them if you do them on Super Chat. And then if we have time at the end, I'll scroll through over on the chat. But let's talk about the Golden Globe Awards. which was going to be the show on Monday morning. And I don't have a whole lot of fancy graphics for this. It was kind of a rush prep day, as always, with this show, it seems like. But I wanted to talk about, kind of the major categories on the film side for the Golden Globes. There weren't a whole lot of surprises, but let's run down some of the nominees here. Best Motion Picture Drama, Frankenstein. I was kind of surprised that Frankenstein was the sort of wild card in the mix that made it. Not that I didn't like Frankenstein. I enjoyed Frankenstein, but it seems to really kind of be surging at the end of the year at kind of the right time. Hamnet, It Was Just an Accident, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, and Sinners. No Avatar, Fire, and Ash there, although I'm sure with the Golden Globes, because they announced in December 8th was when they announced this, there was not a big window to see the movie. I saw it last week, so that's early December. There could have been people that voted before they saw it, so we'll see what word of mouth on that is. I've got my review coming out for it next week. It's under embargo right now, my full review, but yeah, I'm curious about it. We'll see what the reaction is. Interesting to me that there are 3 international films in the mix here. It Was Just an Accident, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, all of them distributed by Neon. Neon picked all 3 of those films up from the Cannes Film Festival. So Neon is crushing it as far as picking up movies out of Cannes and elsewhere that are awards contenders, especially international cinema. Train Dreams is the movie that I might have thought would go in the Frankenstein spot, because Train Dreams is another one that really seems to be getting a lot of momentum. And I just saw it this past week, and I really liked it. It is in contention to be one of my top 10 movies of the year. So I'm a little surprised that it was Frankenstein that got that slot for Best Drama and not Train Dreams. Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy, Blue Moon, Bugonia, Marty Supreme, No Other Choice, Nouvelle Vague, and One Battle After Another. I guess those are comedies. I don't know. There's no real pure comedy in there, I don't think. But that's nothing new with the Globes. Interestingly, Wicked for Good, not in the Best Musical or Comedy. Probably the most pure example of a movie that is eligible for that category, and that it is definitely a musical. Not nominated. We've been talking about it box office wise. It's kind of fallen off the cliff a little bit in its third weekend. So it looks like the movie's losing a bit of momentum. There was a lot of thought that Cynthia Erivo could get nominated, that the movie would be nominated for Best Picture. Ariana Grande looks like it might be that movie's best choice for a high profile Oscar nomination. Honestly, this seems like One Battle After Another's category to lose. Just because it's been getting number one on so many lists. It seems like it really has the momentum right now. Marty Supreme and No Other Choice, especially No Other Choice, because the Golden Globes often like to award international shows and international cinema. I think could be dark horse contenders there, but One Battle After Another, I think is the movie to beat there. And Sinners is probably the movie to beat in the drama category. Although again, when you have 3 international films and Hamnet in there, I think that one's kind of up for grabs. Best Motion Picture Animated, Arco, again, distributed by Neon, Demon Slayer, Infinity Castle, Elio, K-Pop Demon Hunters, Little Amelie or The Character of Rain, and Zootopia 2. No major surprises here. Mamoru Hosoda's Scarlet was considered by many to be a big Oscar contender. Not in this group of movies, and it doesn't really hit theaters till January of next year, so we'll see if it stays on the list. Arco and Little Amelie are probably the 2 movies that people haven't heard of. I've seen both of them. They're both really, really good. Arco, I think, is very reminiscent of it's basically like a Studio Ghibli movie that's not from Studio Ghibli, and I think it's good. And then Little Amelie or The Character of Rain is a very kind of deep sort of inspection of life, but also very cute. And I think that's one that if it wins, people are like, what is that movie? I think it's worthy of being in the conversation with these other ones. K-Pop Demon Hunters, obviously the big one in this group. I think that Elio and Zootopia 2 they're good movies. They should be happy to be there. And the Demon Slayer, it's nice to see that it got nominated. I don't know if it really stands much of a chance to win, but it's good to see it nominated. Cinematic and box office achievement. This is an interesting category for a couple of reasons. Number one, the first nominee is Avatar, Fire and Ash, which hasn't been released yet. And the criteria for this award is that a movie has to make $150 million with at least $100 million gross in the U.S. I get it. That's as sure a thing as there possibly could be with Avatar for that to happen. But I think it's interesting that Avatar, Fire and Ash was nominated speculatively for the Cinematic and Box Office Achievement Award, and then should, let's say, disaster struck, and it's not going to happen, but it's within, it's technically a possibility. What if Avatar: Fire and Ash didn't hit that goal? And would they rescind the nomination? But it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like if you were to nominate the movie for Best Visual Effects before you'd seen it. And I'm not saying that's happened, but I am saying that I did see some early nominations that came out where Avatar: Fire and Ash was nominated for Best Visual Effects. And I knew, because I know when the screenings are, I was 95% confident that the people nominating that movie hadn't seen it yet. It's a speculative nomination. Okay. F1 nominated for Cinematic and Box Office Achievement. This is the other one, K-Pop Demon Hunters, which did get a limited run, didn't make $100 million, but there is a sort of second component to the eligibility for that. $150 million with at least $100 million grossed in the U.S., or commensurate digital streaming viewership recognized by trusted industry sources. So, I mean, K-Pop Demon Hunters definitely has that. It's at like 500 million views on Netflix. So if you're putting a streaming component in there, K-Pop Demon Hunters absolutely qualifies. But again, the box office part, not so much there. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, Sinners, Weapons, Wicked for Good, and Zootopia 2. I'd say Superman is the only movie that I'm kind of mildly surprised isn't in this category. I'm not shocked. It's a good category this year. But I am somewhat shocked that Superman didn't take one of these spots, because it seems to be the kind of movie that the category was made for. But there's a lot of movies, I might have put it in the Mission Impossible spot, maybe. But yeah, so that'll be an interesting clash between kind of high-profile films there. Best Motion Picture not in the English language. It was just an accident. No Other Choice, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, Sirat, and The Voice of Hind Rajab. I think these are pretty much the main contenders right now for the Oscars. There could be one or two others that sneak in there. Maybe there's usually one out of left field in the Best International Film race. But I mean, this is a category of death this year. I've seen It Was Just an Accident. I've seen No Other Choice. I've seen The Secret Agent. I've seen Sentimental Value. In a weaker year, I could see myself voting for any of those four movies. And honestly, right now, looking at it, three of those four, I don't know who I would vote for. And the other one I enjoyed, but there's three of those four that are also in contention for my top 10 list. So it's just a deadly hard category this year. Three of those movies nominated for Best Drama, another one of them nominated for Best Comedy. So this is not just the Golden Globes. The international category is going to be very difficult to parse this year as to who's going to win, because the competition is fierce this year. Best Performance by a Female Actor in a Motion Picture. Drama, Jessie Buckley in Hamnet. She's the one to beat. Jennifer Lawrence in Die My Love. Renata Reinsva in Sentimental Value. Julia Roberts in After the Hunt. Tessa Thompson in Hedda. Eva Victor in Sorry Baby. I was so happy to see Eva Victor in this category, because that was my favorite movie coming out of the Sundance Film Festival back in January. And theatrically, I don't think the release was very well done, so I was worried it was going to get lost in the shuffle. And it's good to see it get a major nomination here, because it at least confirms that there were people watching it and that saw it, because I think that the movie should be up there with the other ones, especially the smaller international films. I think Sorry Baby should be up there. No big surprises here. I think Jessie Buckley, it's her category to lose. Best Performance by a Male Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. Joel Edgerton in Train Dreams, Oscar Isaac in Frankenstein, Dwayne Johnson in The Smashing Machine, Michael B. Jordan in Sinners, Wagner Moura in The Secret Agent, and Jeremy Allen White in Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. I honestly don't know how to pick this one. This is going to be an interesting one. Maybe someone would say Michael B. Jordan. I don't know. The Secret Agent, really good movie. I think that could go one of several different ways. Best Performance by a Female Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. Rose Byrne in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Cynthia Erivo, Wicked for Good. Kate Hudson, Song Sung Blue, which is not out yet. Chase Infinity in One Battle After Another. Amanda Seyfried in The Testament of Anne Lee. And Emma Stone in Begonia. I have to say, having seen If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, the fact that it's in the comedy category is pretty crazy, because it's more of a trauma than a comedy. But I get it. It's the Globes, and it is oftentimes kind of darkly funny. 12 nominees, really, in both the male and female acting categories. You don't really see any leading Oscar contenders very often that are left out here. and I don't really see any that are left here. I think this one's up for grabs. I might give an edge to Emma Stone in this category, but yeah, I think that's pretty much as expected. Best performance by a male actor in a motion picture, musical, or comedy: Timothée Chalamet in Marty Supreme, George Clooney in Jay Kelly, Leonardo DiCaprio, One Battle After Another, Ethan Hawke, Blue Moon, Lee Byung-hun, No Other Choice, Jesse Plemons in Begonia. Happy to see him here. Unfortunately, he's just up against a bunch of titans. I mean, between Chalamet, DiCaprio, and Ethan Hawke, I think that's going to be the talk of this category. And honestly, the Oscars in the Best Actor race is going to be Chalamet, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Ethan Hawke, because those three performances are all great. And the other three, by the way, in this category are great. Clooney, Lee Byung-hun, and Jesse Plemons, all great. I mean, top to bottom, solid nominees here. Best performance by a female actor in a supporting role in any motion picture. So they don't divide the supporting categories by genre. Emily Blunt in The Smashing Machine, Elle Fanning in Sentimental Value, Ariana Grande in Wicked for Good, Inga Ibsdottir Lilius in Sentimental Value, Amy Madigan in Weapons, happy to see her here, Tiana Taylor in One Battle After Another. I mean, Tiana Taylor, there seems to be a lot of momentum kind of building around her. I think that she was good in the movie. Honestly, not to tip my Oscar coverage too much, if I was going to choose one female supporting performance from One Battle After Another, for me, it might be Regina King. But Tiana Taylor was good. It's just there's so much momentum. It seems like sometimes when you have a big ensemble cast, in each category, the industry just kind of picks one of them and decides that's going to be the one. So for me, it wouldn't go that way, but that's not to diss. I'm not going to be Quentin Tarantino here and diss her performance in the movie. She's good in the movie. I would just go the different way. Best performance by a male actor in a supporting role in any motion picture: Benicio del Toro, One Battle After Another, Jacob Elordi in Frankenstein. Like I said, Frankenstein really kind of peaking at the right moment. Paul Mescal in Hamnet, Sean Penn, One Battle After Another, Adam Sandler, Jay Kelly, Stellan Skarsgård, Sentimental Value. This is another category of death this year because one of these six guys is going to get left out. And I don't know who I would pick because I think that they were all really good. I'm disappointed to see Jacoby Jupe not in that category because I think he gives the best supporting performance in Hamnet, Paul Mescal included, which is a borderline supporting co-lead performance. But I would put him in that. I would put him in that group any day of the week, Jacoby Jupe. So, best director motion picture: Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another, Ryan Coogler for Sinners, Guillermo del Toro for Frankenstein, Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident, Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value, Chloe Zhao for Hamnet. No complaints there. All solid picks, all solid movies. It's the kind of year where I could honestly swap in 5 different names and still be happy with that category. So no complaints there. Best screenplay for a motion picture: Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another, Ronald Bronstein and Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, Ryan Coogler for Sinners, Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident, Eskel Vogt and Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value, and Chloe Zhao and Maggie O'Farrell for Hamnet. Again, no complaints, only because I think that there's a lot of great competition in there. I will do my episode toward the end of the year where I kind of give who I would pick for each award. But it's hard for me to just look at these categories and say, oh, I would take that out and I would put this in. I mean, it's really going to take a lot of thinking for me to come up with my 5 favorites. And then this is the first year they're giving a Best Podcast Award, which I'm a little offended that no, I'm not even going to pretend like I would be. This is barely a podcast. Best Podcast Award: Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, Call Her Daddy, Good Hang with Amy Poehler, The Mel Robbins Podcast, Smartless, and Up First from NPR. I used to listen to Smartless. I don't anymore. I haven't really heard any of these other ones. Generally, they stayed away from the political podcasts, both left and right, who were among the short list for this category, but were not nominated. I'm talking about, your Joe Rogans, your Ben Shapiro's, your Pod Save America. None of those nominated, so it seems obvious that they wanted to kind of avoid the politics side of podcasting in the inaugural year. Maybe the right choice. So there you go. Yeah, Golden Globe nominations. It's going to be interesting to see where we go from here. All right, so let's get to some of your comments and questions. Now, I noticed earlier that it looked like my system here of getting things narrowed down before or that it kind of auto stars super chats for me here, and it looked like it maybe wasn't working at the very beginning. So I'm going to scroll up until to get some that were not starred for me, but that I know were asked. Dylan Fitzsimmons asked several pre-show before we even went on the air. Dylan Fitzsimmons, 2278, favorite Christmas movie. Probably National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, although it's a very tight contest between that and It's a Wonderful Life and Elf. There's a lot. Die Hard. Not going to get into that argument. Favorite candy. That's very mood dependent. Some days it's Skittles. Love a good Skittle. Some days, like when I'm on the road and I don't have time to eat, I love to grab a Snickers every once in a while. Yeah. So Skittles if we're going for kind of the sweeter, fruity side. Snickers if we're going more for the chocolatey side. And I like York peppermint patties. It's not my go-to, but if I want something small, if I don't want a candy bar, I'll get myself a York peppermint patty. I don't care if people think that they're old and stuffy. I like them. Oh, we were just talking about this favorite podcast. I don't listen to too many, but the one that I've been listening to the most recently is the Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast because I'm a big SNL head. I'm also a big Lonely Island fan, and it's been great to hear they're going over the digital shorts one by one. It's great to hear the behind the scenes of the show. Top 3 favorite comedies. That would be a 15-minute show of its own for me to sit and like Rolodex everything and decide, oh yeah, these are my 3 favorites. I mean, because I'm going to leave out one that I love. Off the top of my head, I love Airplane. Airplane's always the one that pops in first because I just think it's hilarious and stupid. Blazing Saddles for the same reason. Young Frankenstein for the same reason. Both from Mel Brooks, both the same year. Those are the first 3. I'm not saying those are my top 3. Those are my first 3 that pop in. And then lots of modern stuff like Tropic Thunder that I love as well. Freakstop95 says, are there any Christmas TV episodes you watch every year? Simpsons, Office, Garfield? No, I generally watch movies more every year on Christmas. Although last year I kind of got into a TV mood and I watched the Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special, which is a lot of fun and crazy and nutty and wacky and everything I love about that show. So Pee-wee's Playhouse is the most recent one that I watched that was like a TV Christmas special. The Magician. Okay. Remember Red Letter Media doing a video or 2 on the state of movies and movie theaters, but they don't delve deep into it like you do, and would be cool to see you do something with them or do best of the worst. LOL. I would love, listen, I've said many times over and for many years now, it would be an honor for me to be asked. I love Red Letter Media and have for many, many years. I don't watch a lot of movie channels on YouTube. I do watch more YouTube than I used to, but even given that, it's usually like sports stuff, some sports stuff, or I have a weather guy. If you're into weather, Ryan Hall, y'all, on YouTube, every video I watch, and he goes live with like severe weather stuff. I'm a weather nerd, and I have been since I was a kid, and that is like the Weather Nerds movie channel. So, I watch weather stuff. I don't watch a lot of movie stuff, Taskmaster, obviously. But Red Letter Media is one of the channels that I do watch because I enjoy them and I think they're funny, and it would be an honor to be asked. Freakstop95 says, do you think that there should be more expansions for special showings going forward, like The Lord of the Rings in January? Tried to buy tickets and all showings by me are sold out. Nostalgia sells. I mean, yeah, I think that if that's something that people are interested in seeing, yeah, it really is up to theaters. It's up to the distributors to decide when they want to put it out in theaters. You have to kind of make a tricky balance because you have to activate the people that are going to go, but you don't want to under or over activate. So you don't want to leave people out in the cold, literally waiting, but you also don't want to over schedule and pack in 2 screenings and have an empty theater for 8 screenings. So I think that studios and theaters just need to do a good job of gauging interest and then trying to guess what works best for them and their audience. Gerardo Ariano 990 says, thoughts on doing an Oscars live watch along? I've thought about it. I mean, we used to do an Oscars watch along on Screen Junkies way back in the day, and it was fun. I always had a good time. The thing that holds me back from doing it on my own is that it's also a work night for me. So usually during the Oscars show, I am writing down moments, writing down notes, making notes to myself, doing research sometimes to see, oh, when was the last time this happened? When was the last time that happened? Because I try to get my Oscar recap show out, in the early morning hours, the day after the Oscars. And if I was doing a watch along, and I think I've done 1 or 2 since I started my own channel, and they were fun, but I'm also, rightfully, I feel an obligation to pay attention to the stream and to answer questions and to sort of be more engaged with the live show. And it's its own kind of fun thing and fun aspect of my job, but it also holds me back from doing the prep and the stuff, otherwise. So I've thought about it, but it's all about balancing like doing the live stream and, the benefit of doing that, but also does it put me far behind when I'm prepping my post Oscar show? The Magician again says New Year's themed stream would be cool. Yeah, we'll see. It's really just down to I'm doing a lot of traveling. I'm on the road. I do spend a lot of holiday time with my family, so I try to prioritize that over work during the holidays or during those few days during the holidays. So I'm not saying it's absolutely going to be the last one, but I'm also in heavy production right now. I mean, if you look at my output video wise, this is probably my heaviest output season of the year because not only am I trying to watch all of these different movies for the end of the year, but I'm also making my preview video for 2026 and making my best of video for 2025. I am reviewing all of these holiday releases. I mean, really, the release schedule is at its most aggressive during the holidays. It's also the time of year when I have to travel the most. For example, Avatar was a movie that I had to travel to see because I wanted to see it early enough to vote in the Critics Awards and also have a review done. I'm traveling next week to see a movie early because it opens the week of Christmas. If I travel next week to see the movie, then when the embargo is lifted on, I think, the 23rd, then I can have my review ready and I don't have to worry about working when I'm out of town seeing my family. So it's not just a timing issue. It's also that this is like the craziest time of the year for me, leading right into the Oscars, which is probably the second craziest time. Emir Haiti says, actually seeing Kill Bill tonight, what is the most difficult film professional to separate the art from the artist? Well, I mean, I feel like in the last, 8 years, that list has gotten a lot longer. It's such a personal question, because everybody has their own metric for that. Woody Allen's difficult for me. Roman Polanski is difficult for me. Obviously, any number of actors. Even when I was watching Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair, because I'm sure contractually and just kind of realistically, Harvey Weinstein produced that film. It's tough to sit there and stay immersed in a movie when you see Harvey Weinstein's name come up as a producer. That's hard. And that's a lot of Miramax movies from the 90s and going into the 2000s and the 2010s. How do you put that out of your head that this guy was critical to getting this movie made in many cases? So I think that changes for everybody. But yeah, for me, directors are harder for me to separate because they are so crucial, especially if they're writer directors like Woody Allen. But the big thing that I always try to say, and I get this question a lot, is you can have somebody who's crucial to making the film, but there are other people whose work was just as crucial to making a movie. So, for example, some people say, "Well, I can't watch Annie Hall anymore because of Woody Allen," and I understand it. And I'm not picking on Woody Allen; it's just the first one that pops into my head. Or, I can't watch The Usual Suspects anymore because of Kevin Spacey, and I understand that. I do. But I can watch Annie Hall and still marvel and appreciate Diane Keaton's performance because it is a fantastic performance in that movie. I can still watch The Usual Suspects and enjoy the supporting cast in that movie. And Kevin Pollak and Benicio del Toro doing their thing in that film. I think that Gabriel Byrne's very good in that movie. So I think that there's aspects to movies that you can appreciate without having to say, well, I'm ignoring something about, that artist or that artist. Top 3 favorite Christmas Carol films? So like specifically adaptations of A Christmas Carol? Okay. Muppet Christmas Carol, obviously. The Patrick Stewart one, I think that was a TV one, but the one that Patrick Stewart, where he played Ebenezer Scrooge. And I mean, if we're going strict Christmas Carol and not like Scrooged and sort of riffs on the Christmas Carol, then maybe the George C. Scott one as well. That was a really good one. There's been several good Christmas Carol movies. Sanger2332 says, hello from Melbourne, Australia. Hello there. Do you have any movies that you know are bad, but you secretly enjoy? Mine are the Flintstones movie and Space Jam. Yeah, so many. I talked about it with Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I was talking about how many fans of the games and who grew up or are growing up with Five Nights at Freddy's 2 probably see it and maybe see the same flaws I did, but they have such love for those characters that they don't care, and I understand that. Freddy versus Jason was the example that I used in that review. I understand. I can tell on an objective, as objective as you can get, that there are elements of that movie that are just not good. A lot of the acting, a lot of the writing, but I like the movie because I think it's stupid, and I think that the one thing they did get right was to make that a fun fight between those two, even though the movie around it is not very good. So yeah, there are plenty. Batman Forever, and it's not even secretly enjoy. I'll openly enjoy them. Batman Forever, not a great movie. So tied to so many things, and there's so many things I appreciate about it and how it just sort of swings for the fences and just doesn't care about so many things. Yeah, it's not good, but I enjoy it. I still like the movie. So yeah, I think you can enjoy movies on a lot of different levels. Cartoon 49 says, film that will be a dark horse in this year's Oscars. Well, Train Dreams I thought was going to be, but it seems like it's really picking up a lot of momentum. I thought that was going to be the dark horse one that actually sort of was the surprise, but now it seems a lot more mainstream on the award side. So yeah, I would say Train Dreams. And then the movies, like I said, some of the animated films, particularly Little Amelie, I think that one could even do like a flow situation where it wins and people are like, what is that movie? But it's good. I have to say it's good. I don't know if it would be my vote, but I could see why people would vote for it. Chris Evans, 2008 says, have you been following any of the grassroots theater growth of Markiplier's Iron Lung movie next month? I know about it. I've seen some of the stories about it, but I've not been following it closely. I have read that it's getting released and that there's a lot of support for it, but I haven't super in depth been following it. Arroyo 2099 says Destiny turns on the radio. I think that's a callback to one of the earlier questions. I think is that a TV episode? I think it might be. Billy P 1836 says, not a question, just wanted to give a little something because it's the holidays. Keep up the good work, Dan. Billy, that's very, very generous of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I said this on Charts this week, but I just want to reiterate it here for everybody that might not have seen it. I've been getting so many comments in the last, I'd say 2 weeks, comments on YouTube and people also sharing stories and stuff on Instagram that are saying, hey, my YouTube recap was in and you were one of my top 5 channels. And that's just, I just appreciate so much, number one, that people out there watched the channel enough for it to be one of their top 5 channels. And then number two, that people take the time to tag me. And I don't always respond because I'm bad at social media and I'm often bad at replying to YouTube comments. But I do see that. And I thank you so much to everybody that's taken the time to point that out, because it's just nice to know that there are people who appreciate what I do and are willing to listen to me talk for so much of their year. So I try to make it worth it. I try to make it worth your time. And I appreciate you giving me so much of your time. Draylon Dragon Fox says, what is an objectively bad movie that you love, Dan? For me, it's Johnny Mnemonic. The I Want Room Service scene is some of Keanu Reeves' best acting. I mean, yeah, it's, well, first of all, I take issue with the idea of objectively good or objectively bad, because good and bad is it's what it means to you. So for example, The Room, objectively, by every rule of cinema, is a bad movie. Poorly made, poorly acted, poorly shot, poorly edited, poorly scored, everything. And yet, I love that movie for what it is. So I guess that would be an answer to your question, because it is by every rule of movies objectively bad, and yet it has given people over the years so much joy that you could then make the argument, well, is it bad then? I mean, it is, but what is, bad in what sense? So this idea of good, bad, it's such a relative discussion. And so I have always said, when I've talked about ideas for when we hit 1,000 videos, which I think is pretty soon, I should probably figure out what I'm going to do. And people give the top 100 best movies of all time. 100 best movies of all time, that's an academic discussion. I feel like you've got to put 50 film scholars in a room and have them hash it out. I can give you a list of my 100 favorite movies of all time. And if I did a list like that, that's what it would be. It'd be my 100 favorite movies of all time. Because for me to say, it'd be kind of a Quentin Tarantino move for me to say, okay, you know what? I've decided these are the 100 best movies ever. And that's it. First of all, I don't feel nearly qualified enough to say what the 100 best movies are, because there's always ones you haven't seen as a movie fan. You can't see everything. And so what if I hadn't seen Sunrise or Metropolis, or one of those movies? Well, then how can I be qualified to say that it's not one of the 100 best movies of all time if I haven't seen it? Whereas if it's one of my 100 favorite movies of all time, I can swap a movie in and out whenever I want and not have to explain why I've changed the criteria, or why it's different now, or why I took this movie out. It's just I saw another movie that I liked more, and so I switched this one out. Not like, well, we like this, the Sight and Sound always has to explain why a movie went in or out. That's my problem with good, bad, best, worst, is it's academic, and people don't want academic. They want emotional. And I'm fine with emotional as long as you don't attach best and worst to it. Favorite, least favorite. I know that I'll always say best movies of 2025, worst. That's sort of the trade-off to the business part of YouTube, because that's what people want to hear. But I always try to make sure that I'm very clear about saying, like, I'm saying best, but what I really mean is favorite. YoshiFan4569 says, "Hi Dan, with watch ratings of the Academy Awards show dropping, why won't the Academy include the Governor's Awards in the big show instead of randomly handing them out in November?" I think they used to. I mean, they used to do some of the honorary Oscar shows, awards during the show, and then people complained that it was too long. And then they cut that and they go to the Governor's Awards now that happen back in early November. So I think it's just a function of the awards were too long, and so they're trying to figure out how to save time. I just don't think the Academy has ever used that time smartly. They've never filled that time in a way that makes the show better. They just add different filler, whereas they could actually make the show better. Real Serious says, Tarantino's argument is weak. There Will Be Blood is not a two-hander. It's focused on Plainview. It's important that Eli seems weak because he needs to be the obvious foil to Daniel that he wants to desperately distance himself from. I agree. I mean, that is, Tarantino said that, and I think in every one of his criticisms is like, well, the movie's supposed to be a two-hander between these guys, but they're not equal. It's like, it's not really. I mean, Daniel Plainview's sort of rivalry with Eli Sunday is a major element of the movie, but I agree. The movie is not about those two guys versus each other. It's about Daniel Plainview versus the world, really. And Eli Sunday is a major one of that, but his brother is just as big a part of that. His son is just a big a part of that. So I also kind of fundamentally, along with you, disagree with Tarantino's characterization of the movie, which is that they are two conflicting characters who both have a major role to play, but that movie's about Daniel Plainview. I mean, he's the one left standing at the end of the movie. So I would agree with that too. Like, it's not like a back and forth, sort of rivalry the entire film. Ryan Schuler says, "Hey Dan, general question. Is there another genre boom around the corner? Missing the days of the studio comedy. Can something else replicate the theatrical success of horror anime in 2026? I mean, video game movies seem like they've got a lot of momentum. I think the thing about it is they have to happen organically. I think that the anime boom that we've seen wasn't manufactured. It wasn't a studio saying, we're going to make anime the next big thing in Hollywood. It was just the organic growth of anime over the last really 10 years. And then I think with a lot of anime being on Netflix and then the pandemic where a lot of people had more time, I think it's just sort of naturally happened. I think that every time that Hollywood tries to say, we're going to make something happen, it's just as likely that it doesn't happen. So I think that video game movies have got a lot of momentum, but I think it's also, you just have to listen to the marketplace and you can't try to influence it. And I think it's more about just kind of keeping your ear to the ground. I'd love for studio comedies to make a comeback. The problem is the marketplace, quote unquote, especially theatrically, has not shown that they want a resurgence of studio comedies. If and when they did, I think that we'd see more. We just haven't. Dominique in Souza says, what do you think about Avatar, Fire and Ash getting into the box office achievement category at the Globes when the film is not even out yet? I mentioned that. I think it's presumptive, and I get why they do it, but I think it also kind of cheapens the award a little bit because, I don't know. Sent in the Avatar question right before you answered fully. Oh, well, here's another one then. What is your most anticipated horror release for 2026? Ooh. That's a good question. I'm actually in the middle of compiling my 2026 list to do my preview, so I don't have an extensive knowledge of the all of the releases that are coming up for next year. But off the top of my head, Scream. I'm going to be excited about a new Scream movie whenever one comes out. Until they start consistently disappointing me, I like that franchise. It was part of my teenage years. So right now, sitting here, I would say the new Scream movie, but I'm sure there's probably something else that I'm equally excited about. And the great thing is that there's movies like Weapons that aren't really on anybody's radar at the beginning of the year that end up being huge anticipated releases as you go into the next year. Dominique Insusa also says, what is your favorite found footage horror film? Oh, boy. It's tough because that genre got driven into the ground so quickly. It's been a while since I've seen it, and it depends on whether you would categorize this as horror. Some people would and some people wouldn't, but Chronicle is one that, and again, art and artist, is one that I think did it one of the best in the post Blair Witch world, is one of the ones that did it the best. So that, if you count that as horror, that's one of them. And Blair Witch, I just rewatched it for my horror bracket. I mean, I think that parts of it are still effective, but it's also kind of shown its age. Robbie OB says, have you been following Zach Woods' socials on the Tarantino story? Yeah, I saw something that one thing that Zach Woods posted today. He's going in pretty hard on Quentin Tarantino, and I get it. That's the thing. If you want to hit hard, if you want to be merciless in your criticism of somebody, you have to be prepared to get that in return. And that's what Zach Woods has been doing, and bringing up stuff about Quentin Tarantino that he probably wouldn't want people to remember, like his comments about Roman Polanski in the past. That's the thing. If you want to play that game, you got to be ready to play it right back, or to have people play it right back at you. Because if you want to say somebody's overrated and blah, 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 well, guess what? People have been saying that about Quentin Tarantino since the 1990s. And they've got a lot of ammunition they can pull out to support that argument. I'm not necessarily driving the Quentin Tarantino is overrated train, but I see why it's on the tracks, if you get my drift. So, yeah. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Sway6718 says, do you think Train Dreams would work as a double feature with Robot Dreams? Maybe. I don't know, though. I think they're maybe a little too different, other than the names. Cartoon 49 says, noir film that's better, Chinatown or LA Confidential? Art from artist in both cases. They're both really good. It's been a minute since I've seen Chinatown. It's actually been a minute since I've seen LA Confidential. I would say that Chinatown to me strikes me more as a genuine noir film. LA Confidential to me strikes me as a movie that knows that it's a noir movie and is leaning into a lot of the conventions. Not necessarily in a self-aware way, but it's almost like, I'm not going to say a pretender, because I think it's a very good movie. But it's a movie that's kind of consciously trying to be noir. And I think that Chinatown is, I'm sure they were still trying to consciously make it that way, but it strikes me as a much more genuine example of that genre. So I'd go Chinatown, but both good movies. Tremonti Dude says, hey, Dan, met you in Orlando a few years back for the MTS live show. Have you ever considered bringing back your All My Movies segment? I really enjoyed it. Thanks for being awesome. Yeah, I get that a lot. And I love how many people loved it. It was just a case of the time that went into it and the return that I got from it. It just was not a very, to be frank, highly viewed show, and particularly not for the way that I did it required a pretty large amount of effort per episode. And there's sometimes, especially when you're doing this on your own and independently, you just have to look at what you're doing and be honest with yourself and say, I may love doing this, but it's just not the time I'm putting into it versus what I could be using elsewhere. It's just not worth it. And it was very work intensive. And so, yeah, I had to let it go, but I haven't really thought about it just because I don't see any real fix for that. I don't know if it would have better engagement now versus when it did a few years ago when I stopped doing it, but I loved the show and I appreciate how many people still say they enjoy watching it too. Fluffy Pro says, I think podcast is too broad of a category. Do you think it's a good addition, or would you add another category instead? I mean, I don't know why the Golden Globes needs to give a podcast category in the beginning. There are podcast awards, plenty of them, and internet awards and web awards that separate podcasts out into different categories. Because you're right, podcast can mean so many different things. Again, this show technically is a podcast because we do streaming on YouTube, but also I release everything on audio. So this show is a podcast, and also Smartless is a podcast, and also Morbid is a podcast. I mean, and they're all radically different. Big podcasters, small podcasters, celebrities, people that have become celebrities through podcasting. I just don't know why the Golden Globes needs a podcast category. It's so outside the realm of everything else they do. But they added the stand-up comedy category. They added the podcast category. They're trying to be relevant. They're trying to stay relevant. I get it. It's just a weird fit with what they do. But yes, I do think it's a little too broad to put every podcast in the same one. Yasio Yay became a YouTube member. Thank you very much. Welcome. Fluffy Pro became a YouTube member. Thank you, Fluffy. Welcome. Spencer C. 1996 said, thoughts on the Robert De Niro movie Night Falls? Well, you know, Night Falls is really an underrated film. I believe Al Pacino was in that too. And it doesn't surprise me that not many people have heard it about it. It's very obscure. It's so obscure, you could probably even give it as an answer on some kind of movie game show and pretend it was real. And it would leave the fact checker sitting there desperately trying to figure out whether this is some direct-to-video movie he'd never heard of, because De Niro had made a lot of those in the early 2000s until it was too late. So yeah, I mean, surprisingly good and yet also obscure. That would be my thoughts on Night Falls. Christopher Brickner, 5181, and I think we're getting close to the end of the question. So if you have something that you haven't asked yet and you want to put in a super chat, now would be the time, because we're at about an hour and I don't want to overstay my welcome here, but I'm going to answer, obviously, the rest of the questions. Christopher Brickner, 5181, says, for Star Wars Starfighter, I'm curious how the general audience feels about it being an original story taking place 5 years after Episode 9. I could see audiences not interested in it. Unfortunately, I could too. They are going to have to really sell that movie. It used to be you could just sell something based on Star Wars. You could just say Star Wars blank and people would go, yeah. And then you could go from there. They're going to have to sell the audience on that movie specifically, because just the way that things have gone with Star Wars in the last 5-ish years or so, and really almost the last 8 or 9 years, you can't just say Star Wars blank and people are automatically going to be excited about it. So they are going to have to sell that movie probably harder and in a different way than they've ever had to sell anything before, because just the brand name now, it's not enough. Jerry Sue says, curious how many videos you put out this year. YouTube told me it had been 171 as of last week. How many videos I put out in 2025? Let's see. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I put one out at a minimum every 2 to 3 days. Although I think this month I put out, it's the 10th. I think this is my 8th video in 10 days in December. Not always because of a planning on my part, but because of the Netflix Paramount thing. That was 2 videos I did not anticipate making. So I put out 8 in 10 days in December. 171 sounds about right though. Yeah. So it's weird when I think about the fact that I've put out almost 1,000 videos on this channel. I mean, it's kind of hard to wrap my head around, because the way that I do things is the live streaming is pretty new to me, mostly on my videos. Every video I put out requires almost a minimum of 4 to 6 hours, often more. I mean, if we're talking about a ranking video, that's 40 to 60 hours if we're putting watch time in there or more. So the massive amount of just man hours put into videos is hard for me to calculate, especially when we're getting close to 1,000. But yeah, 171, I guess that sounds about right. I don't know if that counts live streams, because live is on a different side of the kind of count for YouTube videos. There's uploads and live streams, and this is our 16th live show, believe it or not. So that also gets added in. Christopher Brickner says, I like in a recent interview, Jeremy Johns said he liked not retconning a hated element and trying to make it work and respected it. Then he said, I'm not saying that will work for everything, Lucasfilm. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I'm not going to specifically mention The Last Jedi, because I'm done with it, and what have been for a while. But it's also relevant for a lot of things. I think it is better to try to respond to criticism uh, over something that people don't like. You can either ignore it and keep going the direction you were going, or you can try to tweak things and adjust things. And people have done that before. There have been characters added to TV shows that people didn't like, and then they adjusted some things, and everyone said, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, they did a better job with that character." What I think is the worst possible thing, and Star Wars has done it, and other franchises have done it too, is to get spooked and go the exact opposite way and not do it in a way that makes sense, and think that you're going to make people happy by just saying like, "Oh yeah, no, we're not doing that, and we're going to bend over backwards to make sure we don't do that." That's the worst possible way. So I would agree with Jeremy in that I think that it is better to try to say, "Okay, I get that you didn't like it, but we're going to massage this here because we still believe in it. We can make it work." And things are a little cleaner that way. You don't always get that though. Spencer C. 1996 says, "Best Picture winner tier list one of these days would be cool, but a huge undertaker taking." Yes, it would be. I've thought about doing that, but there is not so much post 1980. There's only maybe 2 or 3 post 1980 that I've seen, but going back, there's probably out of 100 or not quite 100, but almost 100 Best Picture winners. I'd say there's maybe 40-ish that I haven't seen, and a lot of them are super long. We're talking 3.5 hours for some of them. So yes, it would be a big undertaking. Maybe, Oscars are close to 100, aren't they? Maybe by then, maybe not. Miku Chan says, "Have you ever considered doing a Cine 2 Nerdle stream?" I have played the game, but I didn't really know that you could do a whole stream around it. Maybe you can. I had not considered it, but it's a fun game to play. Christopher Brickner says, "A problem with expanding Star Wars sequel trilogy is the time frame is too short at 1.5 years, so it feels like sequel elements are forced into another era." Yeah, I mean, Star Wars has really painted themselves into a corner with that timeline because you run out of corners of the galaxy that nobody knows anything about. Another one from Christopher Brickner. Follow-up, when Lucas expanded the prequels, at least it was all set during the time frame of the prequel trilogy and not other eras like Old Republic. Yeah, I mean, again, with Lucas, it was all kind of under a unified thing. I think the problem with recently is it's gotten so sprawling and not everybody's visions all match each other. Also from Christopher Brickner, "Scream has consistent quality as of the 6 films on Rotten Tomatoes. 5 are fresh, 4 are certified fresh, and the one rotten film, Scream 3, has an okay 45%. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Although, I'd be curious to see on Scream 4, and I don't know the answer to this, but my guess is that when the movie came out, the reviews were worse than they are now, because as time goes on, there's a lot of retroactive reviews that get added to the total. I suspect that contemporaneously, Scream 4 maybe had worse reviews than Rotten Tomatoes might show, but I could be wrong on that. That's just a suspicion for me. Dominique N. Souza says, "Any thoughts on actors getting plastic surgery and how that factors in on their ability to emote? Asking because I find Instagram faces in period films can be so distracting sometimes." Well, I mean, I feel like that is something that people can take shots at easily. And I've probably, if you were to dig up my comments on YouTube, on Screen Junkies and Fandom in the past, I've probably taken some shots at it before. I think that there is celebrities are public figures, and that makes you open to criticism. And I get it. And I don't think that celebrities are above criticism, but I think particularly when we're talking about plastic surgery and weight issues, either gaining or losing. And I mean, so much of the discussion around Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo with Wicked for Good has been about weight issues. Like, the thing that I have often commented on with their press tours is like the just the crazy happenings in the interviews and stuff. But, a lot of people have commented on their weight. A lot of people comment on plastic surgery. And I think that there is a potential psychological component to that, body dysmorphia, and just the idea of having your face everywhere, and somebody's going to comment on it. And if you have a wrinkle, or if you have a bag under your eye, or somebody's going to send you a mean, nasty thing about it. Yeah, there are plenty of celebrities who I look at and I'm like, oh, why? Like you would look so much better if you age naturally, and then some celebrities have, and I'm like, I think that but I also think that there can be so much insecurity tied into getting that done, and so much pressure, and so many things that could be clinical that I don't comment on that too much, especially now. Like I said, you could probably dig up times where Nicole Kidman or an actress maybe in the past where I've made those comments, but I kind of stay away from it now because it's just there could be so much tied into it, and I think that most people should kind of take a breath, before. And it's not saying you're in the wrong, because you're right. It can be distracting sometimes to see a period film, and you're like, oh well, that person's had fillers or Botox or whatever done, but yeah. Dan, Destiny Turns on the Radio is a movie that starred Quentin, which bombed, and his performance was laughed at by critics. Okay, well there you go. I knew that title sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. So there you go. Christopher Bickner says, I want a documentary on the mismanaging of Star Wars. Well, I mean, just look at YouTube over the last 8 years. It's a pretty good one. Wesley Cav1 says, would you do your version of the Screenies Awards? I'd love to see your takes on the best and worst of the year in those fun made-up categories. I actually do that in my best of and worst of video every single year. The opening segment, which a lot of people say is boring, but which I love to do, is kind of my version of the Screenies. I make up categories. Some are fun, some are more serious, and give out my own little awards. So look for that in my best worst video at the end of the year. I do my own little mini Screenies. Philly G7272 gave a super sticker. Thank you so much, Philly G. Christopher Bickner says, you may be done with Last Jedi, Dan, but Last Jedi will never be done with you, unfortunately. No, I'd say Last Jedi is done with me, and I'm done with it. People can ask me about it, but I have nothing to contribute. Dominique Souza says, great show as always, Dan. Huge fan over here since movie fights and all Transformers rants back at Screen Junkies. Happy holidays. Cheers from Brazil. Happy holidays back to you. Brazil on fire with their movies the last couple years. Secret Agent, awesome movie. Paul Hitchcock says, Dan, you old polecat, you old so-and-so. Thoughts on Starfleet Academy? Not optimistic, but hope it's good. Who wins a pie eating contest? You or Roka? Thoughts on Starfleet Academy? I saw that the reaction to the initial trailer and stuff, the poster was not very strong. I haven't seen the trailer yet. There were screeners sent out for the first season that are under embargo until next month. And I've been so buried, I haven't even thought about watching them. But, I have not been a fan of a lot of more recent Star Trek stuff. So, yeah, I walk into every Star Trek project now kind of crossing my fingers. Who wins a pie eating contest, me or Roka? I don't know. It depends on what kind of pie, I think, for me. I'm talking personally. I don't know about Roka's own preferences with pie. It depends on what kind of pie. Are we talking like a pumpkin pie with like a creamier filling? Are we talking like a fruit pie with more of a cherry or a fruit filling? I actually can't really eat or drink anything very fast. I have tried, especially as I've gotten older. Like I'm kind of a fast eater by nature, not like in a competition way. And I've even had to slow down because it's just as I get older, I get heartburn, reflux, and everything. I don't know about Roka, but I know that it's something that I struggle with. So with the void of not knowing what's up with John, I'll give John the edge on that. Exatube says, if we can go beyond the Thunderdome, there can be another Jedi that's not the last. I'm kind of done with Jedi, honestly. Maybe that's just me. Muhammad Ahmed OC6OL says, thoughts on the studio and how they show the industry. I love the studio. I think I've talked about it a couple times on the Emmys. That's one of the shows that I actually did sit down and watch all the way through. And I will say, and I think it's what I said when it came out, it's very heightened, obviously, but I was never in the upper echelons of power and in an executive office or anything like that. But I did work on my share of TV shows and movies, particularly a lot of TV, and have seen the industry as a bystander for many years now. It's not that heightened. It's not. It's heightened, but not that much. The industry is full of a lot of very insecure people and a lot of people who are trying to do their best, but get sort of corrupted by the big job, the big paycheck, the box office, the money. So I think that it's pretty accurate, but very heightened, very to a ridiculous degree, but with a very real core kernel of truth there. Freakstop95 says, seems like Golden Globes just nominated stuff to get all the most relevant celebs in the room, not because they always deserve it. Miss Ricky Gervais. That has been the case with the Golden Globes for many, many years. And the last comment that I have here is from Phil Smith, 5500. It says, thanks, Dan. Have a great Christmas and New Year. Thank you, Phil. As I mentioned, I don't know necessarily if there will be another live show this year. Obviously, you will be the first to know if there is. I'm just doing a scan here to make sure there weren't any other ones. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any other super chats that I missed. As always, you guys were so great about sending in questions. I don't know if I've got a whole lot of time to scan the comments for the rest or for other ones, but let's see. Let's just grab one that I just see here. FM EW5JB. How many physical DVDs were you mailed this year? How many streaming films were you given links for? Guesstimate. Not a whole lot of physical DVDs, probably a third of what I used to get. I am lucky enough to be part of Critics' Choice, the Critics' Choice organization, and this is the second year, and they did a great job last year. They did a better job this year. They set up a streaming app on Apple TV and elsewhere that streams the nominees. And so I would say that physical media, physical DVDs, are far less common than they used to be, but I'd say a handful still, maybe 20 or so, and then probably 100 different movies to watch. Again, not a complaint. Just not a complaint at all, just something that has kind of changed as far as the end of the year. I think I saw a couple more comments come in here. Yeah, Christopher Brickner says Scream 4 was rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, but moved fresh. I thought so. I thought that might be the case. And Dominique Insouza says, what's your favorite David Lynch movie? I'm not as versed in David Lynch as I should be, probably. There's a lot of his movies that I haven't seen because in a lot of cases he's not really my cup of tea. A director who I respect enormously, who we're just kind of on different vibes and different wavelengths for a lot of it. I feel like there's one David Lynch movie that I'm always like, but that one's my favorite, and I'm totally blanking on it because I've seen a lot. I mean, I've seen Mulholland Drive and I've seen Dune and movies like that, but I'm trying to think if there's, it always seems like there's a David Lynch movie and I'm like, yep, that's the one that's my favorite. But for the life of me, I can't think of it right now. Here, I should probably just look it up. We're going to do the boring thing of Dan looks up things because I don't want to just leave it hanging, especially because, I mean, my gosh, I can't believe it's been almost a year since he died. What a loss to the community. That's a case where, like I said, good, bad. David Lynch movies transcend good and bad because it's just, that's not why he made movies, and that's not why they weren't intended to be seen through that lens. Blue Velvet, I think, would be the one that I always say, like, yeah, that one I would say is my favorite because it's still very David Lynch, but it's also on a bit of a, not quite as vibey as a movie like Eraserhead, which I just saw for the first time this year. But I still have to see, if I haven't seen Inland Empire. I haven't seen The Straight Story. I think I've seen Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, but it's been a very long time. I haven't seen Wild at Heart. And Elephant Man is impossible to find, or was at the beginning of the year. I think it's easier to find now. So, yeah. All right, this is going to be the last question because this came in while I was answering that one. What are your thoughts on 3D films, i.e. art house? I'm not quite sure what specifically what the art house thing is, but 3D films, I think you can make a fantastic use of the technology. Avatar, great example of using the technology in the way that it is, the way that it's intended to be used. I think that when you convert movies cheaply to 3D, that's when it just becomes a gimmick. And I think that that's what ran 3D into the ground for a lot of people. But if you do a movie like Gravity, all three Avatar films, to some degree or another, movies that were meant to be seen in 3D were made specifically for that purpose. I think it can be a great use of form and function and the medium. But I think let's just take whatever movie that was shot in 2D and convert it to 3D. I'm not a fan of. Okay, seriously though, this is the last one because I do have to go. EQSATUB says, Dan looks things up. Isn't that Charts with Dan? Yes, it is to an extent. You're just not here for me, watching me in the process of looking things up. It's more of just you get the end result of me looking things up. Charts with Dan would be a much longer show, about 6 to 8 hours, and much more boring if you were just watching me look everything up. All right. That's it. I'm going to call an end to the show. Thank you so much to everybody who sent in a question. Thank you so much to everybody who just, kind of listened to what I was saying. And thank you so much to everybody who watched. If this is the last time that I see you this year live on the channel, of course, I'm going to have so many more reviews and everything else that come out this year. But if this is the last time I see you live, thank you so much to everybody who helped me launch this show. Be sure to stay tuned and come back in 2026 as I continue to try to evolve it and maybe one day do an actually technically proficient show with no flaws, where the audio and the video are all good. But as always, I appreciate your support. I appreciate you watching the channel this year. I will see you back here very soon. If I don't talk to you directly, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, any holiday that you may or may not celebrate. Enjoy it. Stay safe. I'll see you next time. Bye.